So, before I start, I wanted to run by some of the rules that you guys aren't following for the challenge. So, currently there's a challenge running, and the challenge is about it's basically you have to sketch, fully flesh out a forest scene of a witch's hovel. So, what does that mean? It means you don't use random sketchy lines and hope that out of it comes a render, because this is not what I'm talking about. You get rid of these shades right here. You get rid of all of this stuff. You leave behind only your lines and you render. Go in and render. So I did an example of how I want them to look. I don't really like my versions, but don't copy the format that I'm doing because it's not good either. But basically this is what I mean. You go in there and you flesh out. Why is this happening? You flesh out the forest, you flesh out everything that needs to be drawn. Please don't look at that, or look at that, because I'm not very proud of that. Or this, because now I'm zoomed in. No. So you can't just or create the illusion of detail. This challenge is about teaching you how to detail. So there's like a content problem in our visual libraries. There isn't enough of a combination of texture familiarity. So when it comes time to render a bark, it looks like any common cylinder. It doesn't look like bark. So this is what the challenge is about. This challenge was all about rendering, and rendering with only a pencil. So please remember that. Also, please avoid high angle, like extreme bird's eye view or extreme worm's eye view. You don't need that intense, especially because it's a concept. You don't need, where was it? This right here, this extreme bird's eye view isn't good. What we want to see is basically at least a level. It can be a minor bird's eye or minor worm's eye, but it can't be major. It can't be anything intense like this because we're missing out on a lot of detail. And if you are going to paint this traditionally and transfer to digital, I recommend you just get the details in right away. Don't try to do half digital, half traditional. It won't look right. It won't look the same on either side. The brush strokes and the pencil strokes are very different from each other. But so far I'm seeing some, like this one here is a little bit too much of an extreme worm's eye, sorry. But as long as you can fit in some kind of detail here, that'll be good too. It's supposed to be like, this is extreme bird's eye. This is not acceptable, but this is acceptable. Also, please stick to the 16:9 ratio. So if you don't know what that is, it was the same format as the last challenge I gave you. This looks great. I absolutely love this. I love how unrendered the thumbnails are, but the final one you really went in and detailed it. Really, really good job. Really like this. Stay away from the pure white background. This isn't pure white background, but just try to stay away from it. Yeah. So the challenge is due on the 30th, and I really want you guys to push your rendering as far as possible. It shouldn't be that much of a lengthy process just to finish the final piece. A lot of your time, spend all of your time, the majority of your time should be spent on your thumbnails, deciding the composition, the camera angle. Last class we looked at how important it is to keep your mind on the camera angle. So yeah, please do that. So really just line art. Yes, it is line art, but it's not like perfectly clean manga line art. Alright? Please remember, it's not manga line art. Write that back to me so I know you remember that. It's pencily lines. You can use sketchy lines. You can use recursive lines minimally. The point isn't the line work here. The point is what the line is drawing. It's the leaves and the detail of the trees and the gestures of the trees and the anatomy of the architecture of the house, and all of that stuff is really important. It's not manga line art, and it's not rendering thumbnails, so it's not about shading. Don't shade yet. I will ask you to shade these later, but please don't shade. This here, where is it? Where did it go? Well, this shading, I don't want to see this. I don't want to see this shading. Please try to use the same pencil brush all around. So use a different one here, a different one here. Just no gray background that's that dark. There's a little bit white gray, but not white. Just something like a pencil. No shading, please. No shading whatsoever. This is not about rendering anymore. This is exactly what I want to see. Maybe a slightly lighter background. This is exactly what I want to see, and try to flesh it out. These look wonderful. This is exactly what I want to see here. If you guys can just copy this format, I just love that. Where's Sarah? Sarah's work. Sarah Chris. Where are you, Sarah? Right here. This is beautiful. Alright, I love this. This is exactly what I want to see. Maybe go a little bit lighter, Sarah, so your lines can come out a little bit more. But, I know it's weird that I'm assigning you guys like a line drawing, but that's what I have to assign you so that we can take a look as a diagnostic. How much do you really know about how to draw a forest? Like, do you know how to draw one yet? Have you tried ever sitting down and drawing up a bunch of leaves? It isn't as easy as it looks to try to get that exact natural organic scatter in the leaves, and the way they hang, and the way they and lean. All of that is is really specific. You have to go for the first time you go for it is always really, really difficult and doesn't read, and that's why I want to get you guys into environment studies and just fleshing out the anatomy of an environment. Get you more in touch with your visual library and how inaccurate it might be. So I'm going to look at some of these first. There's a little bit of everything here. I'm going to start with this one. So for this piece, beautiful job. I just want to see more of a land, like just some kind of land over here. So what I'm doing is just like a really, really quick just way to represent the floor. Just like that, just a way to represent it, and then deselect, select inverse. Okay, so that when we have the floor in a landscape, when we don't have it, when a landscape is missing a horizon line, we really have no way to gauge perspective. Write that back to me. The horizon line is hand in hand with perspective. What does that mean? That means that when we don't have a floor on which to reference everything, distance-wise, closeness-wise, scale-wise, we don't have any way of utilizing scale to its maximum, so we can really show, okay, this is a massive landscape. So remember the rules of depth that I taught you last time. So the triangle, and then the triangle that is up against the horizon, and then it's blurry. This is all it all has to do with the horizon line. Number one rule of a landscape, when you're trying to show something is in the foreground and something is in the background, and you've got two triangles that are equal in size, and one of them has to be in the distance, without even shrinking the size of this one, we just have to throw it in the distance on a horizon line, and suddenly we get, just from that little thing, we get depth. So when we're missing a horizon line, we're missing depth. Write that back to me. Or write it. You don't even have to write it back to me if you're writing it in your notebooks. That's all I mean when I say write it back to me. It's as if you're writing it down. That way you remember it better. So when we throw a horizon line here, what happens is that the landscape becomes more accessible to us as an actual land, and less like a valley, because it's very awkward to just fill a canvas up with just this. This is very odd. This is essentially what you drew. If we can boil down what you drew to one shape, this is exactly what you drew, and this is really awkward. This looks just a little bit more interesting. And then this, this looks even more interesting, like a worm's eye view through a valley. Then we have the ground, which can be a little bit lower actually because it's worm's eye. And then I also did that. And then the really, really massive ship and the tiny people here. So this is the scale, this is the object in the distance, and this is the horizon line starting it all. So it all starts in the horizon line. Every landscape you're ever going to draw starts in the horizon line. If it's a high horizon line, you're a bird. If it's a low horizon line, you're a worm. And if it's at an angle, there's there's some sort of instability, there's some kind of fight, it's uncomfortable. When you're falling down, when you're not standing straight, the horizon tilts. So this is one way to make your viewer feel uneasy. So this is to create the feeling of uneasiness. And then if you want to throw the mountains, same exact method, and throw those tiny pieces in the oncoming ship that is scaring the individuals in the foreground. This, exactly what I did just now, is like a storyboarding kind of thumbnail. You're experimenting with different, really, really boiling it down to a couple of gesture lines, which you're experimenting with how you could lay out the canvas. But if you just start off straight just like this, and you just throw in, without any floor, without any gauge at all of where these guys are and what's happening, then it doesn't feel accurate. Every valley has a ground, so try to include that in there. Okay. So I'm gonna throw some highlight, throw some highlight over here along the floor, and this will help lead us towards this object here. This object, considering everything is leaning, this one here is the only one standing straight. And when it's standing straight like that, it feels like it's cutting the canvas in two halves. If it's a little bit tilted as well, like the other ones, this will work as an arrow to point to this piece here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to erase this chunk right here. I know when the highlight blink. Sorry, it's in my head now. It can only mean one thing. It means the pizza's here. Alright. Okay, actually I think I'm just gonna have to like erase all of it. I can't believe I shimmied on the video. I couldn't control it. That song makes me dance, yo. Whatever, I do something crazy every day. Alright. So I'm just gonna throw that in there. A little bit of a piece here. And then some atmospheric fog near the base. Alright. Deselect. Maybe I can give it more of a crazy shape. There we go. Kind of like mimicking this shape. You could probably use a little bit more here. This random dark patch here, this is a result of some brushwork, like unfortunate brushwork. We really want to see that the background, that the sky is always the lightest in an environment piece, in a landscape. No, I sing terribly. Please, don't. Let's not go there. Let's just try to keep me only in art and not in anything else. And when we kind of add, I know you want to darken the canvas around, but when we do that, when we darken the canvas around the edges, we kind of just throw off what's really happening in the landscape and the sky and the weather. All right. So the only time the background would go this dark is if the weather was, really stormy, and it's also hitting the end of the day, and we get that. And then finally, this massive light, this asteroid that just landed, it seems, it could be a sun, but that's what it really looks like. I want to see that you're casting some shadows, man. These are really long pillars in front of a really bright light source. What happened? Where's the light that results out of this? Okay, sorry I'm not looking at the comments. I will in just a moment. I can't do this accurately because I need the layers, but really important that we get these cast shadows here. Really important. Alright. Let me see if I can blur them out or something. Maybe use the layer mode. Someone asked me how to use layer modes. It's the only way to use them is by experimenting with them. You need to experiment. You need to figure out what each one offers you. There's a massive descriptions about what each one offers you. So you can just Google the descriptions about what each layer mode does. But essentially what the point is to get the work done faster. So for this, I know I want to keep the dark, so I'm looking for a layer mode that'll keep the darks, but look at that. Color dodge. Only illuminated stuff that was light and kept the stuff that was dark, which is what I want. This is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. So this is how I recommend you guys use color dodge. And there might be even like another cast shadow behind this piece. No, I'll just use them. Just like that. So that's how you really use color modes. This whole area here would be just a little bit lighter because all that light is coming through and diffusing. And if this was some ice, this ice would get a little bit more water. And if this was ice here, it kind of feels like it's like a tundra. I'm not sure if you guys are getting that feeling, but I get the feeling that it's a tundra. So you might have subsurface scattering just along here. And then now that we've touched on all of that, we see that the light source itself is just a little bit too strong too soon. So you might want to just encase it into only where it belongs. Just around there. But yeah, try to use some color, what are they called? Layer modes. Really, really cool to use just to maximize your use of them in your work. I feel like this whole section here should be, like there should be a continuation of where the rock was. Maybe I can fake. So like the shadow started here, and then it just abruptly ended, and then it continued along here. I'm just going to use the smudge tool. Whoa, what the hell is happening? Color dodge, and it's smudging so weirdly. I'll merge it down and then smudge it. And then diffuse it, because it's a bit too much contrast all the way up there. What's this brush doing? Oh. Something like that, and get it out of the way. Okay, so the subsurface scattering, of course, wouldn't cast this massive a shadow, so let me go back to where I did that and just get rid of it. But that subsurface scattering is an option, of course. But it wouldn't cast this big a shadow if it was there. So when we don't have a horizon line and we have these massive lights, we just have to remember just the basics, really. Think about where your horizon line is in your painting, and then think about the bigger lights that are happening, that are being cast across. If you want that big piece back, if it's essential to the plot, I really don't know. It might be like the landing strip for this ship. So that might be what that large piece was for, but lean it off just a little bit maybe. Maybe over time it lean. But if it's supposed to be straight, then we can't change that if that's what the narrative is demanding. You can keep one of these. You can keep that. But we still need to see some kind of cast shadow just running across. You can keep everything, but we need to have both the landscape, the base of the, I know it's tilted and it's on a Dutch angle, but even then you can just tilt it and we still need that kind of flat floor that's large enough for us to see it. So flatten and then do that. Okay. So this right here, it seems to be a very dim, stormy day. So what we do when we start off in a light environment that already starts off with a sun that's hidden and there's gray clouds in the sky diffusing all of that yellow from the sun, stuff that needs yellow in order to become vibrant, like the chest or the skin, all need to be desaturated. So we grab this exact color of the environment. This is the most recursive color, this palish yellow that comes in different degrees, but it's the most recursive color. So this is the color that I'm going to throw over his chest. And it's going to feel like this character is in this environment. Lucy! Shut up. Okay, so I'll show you before. It was just a little bit too saturated and a little bit too pink, considering there isn't enough sunshine to fuel all this color. And then now that we've established this really, really strong wash, this kind of washy color, now when we do use a cool like this, we can really use it, we can really exaggerate it, so we can get a color dodge. Grab that. I love what you did with the sword. And just throw it on. Maybe not color dodge, I'll find another one. Okay. And then the eyes as well. Is this like an angel, like Michael or something? And then after that, I would lighten the background. Again, this is a sky, so it shouldn't be dark like that in one random area. It should just be as light as it needs to be. And these shadows here shouldn't be that dark. Everything is pretty diffused. Everything is pretty clean in this kind of gray environment. Nothing is too dark and nothing is too light. So saturation stays down a bit. If you wanted to throw the halo only around his head, that's what you have to do. It can't be shared with this other guy who he seems to be punishing. Don't want to throw a halo around him. Just want to keep the halo around this guy. And because we've used a blue here, some of this blue is going to get on everything else. So in order to unify this clash between these two colors, what we can do is throw some blue on anything that the blue is nearby. So you've already done that, anything that is nearby the blue. You've already done that a bit, but this blue is it's very strong glow, so it's going to travel everywhere. I'm going to throw it just a little bit around. Anywhere that sits near the blue. You've done that nicely on the ground here, the side of the shoes. All in all, I think that this really pale light source like environment that you've chosen, so let's do a before and after just by checking the colors. This light source environment that you've chosen is just a little bit too confused. If we grayscale everything and we start off from one core color, I recommend you start off with a kind of like a divine color. You see the sky was a very muddy color. This here was way too strong and patchy. After we kind of just balanced it out, but colors are still problematic here. Also, the wings are really under detailed compared to their vicinity to the focal point. Now we can see the detail in his belly button, but we can't, and the detail in his veins here in his arm, but we can't see feathers. That's why we have to make sure we detail at least some of the feathers adjacent to the focal point. And as for the general mood of the painting, it's really hard to pinpoint exactly which color deserves to be here. But I feel like if you focused on one solid color, maybe like this blue everywhere, but we erase away where we need some fleshy colors. And the fleshy colors that we erase away, we have to move them over to be a more cool version. So before they were just red. But I would select only this area and probably shift it over. So you did start off with grayscale, I think, and then you move the colors over. So I would move the colors. Oh, whoops. Wrong area. I would move the colors towards a green. So we have that green color. So the color of the sky, or the current state, so some blue is coming through and it's kind of a gray, windy day. This angel descended, and so we're choosing that's going to be the basic gray-blue color of the sky. And then the skin tone, we've made it so that when that blue went over the flesh, it canceled out the yellows and left behind some greens in the skin. So the green takes over. And now you can introduce a third color in the shadows that only sits in the shadows, and every shadow would get this color. So it can be a purple, it can be any other color you want, really. But this is just about balancing out your colors and making sure that your values aren't too dark and too muddy, so that when you do transfer over from grayscale, it'll work. Okay, so do you see the problem here? You had this really strong glow of blue traveling up across. What I recommend is unifying somehow this blue with this character. So because it seems very random, this blue, which is attracting all my attention, it seems very random. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw more blue into his eyes and throw some of that blue into his hair. So if he's glowing out of this, maybe some of that blue got in his hair. Maybe you can throw some of that blue into his wings. So that you're kind of unifying the theme here. Also, if there was light traveling through, so if there was a, let's say, darken, if there was like a shadow here, some of that subsurface scattering of the light source would travel through his wings and just make this really beautiful effect right along here, just under his wings. Of course, you need some detail here. The soft brush of Dodge tool is too strong, and it's almost completely camouflaged with the background where the sky starts and where his wing starts. Remember, the sky needs to be light. The sky has to be light if it's outdoor. Remember that. Write that back to me. If it's outdoor, the sky has to be bright. Just somewhat bright so that these characters can stick out just a little bit more. It's not that dark, of course. I'm using the wrong shade here. Dun, dun, dun. Okay. And then, of course, we erase away the top parts of the wing, wherever the light is happening on the wing. And down here. The wing itself needs to be much lighter. It needs to stay light, but I'm just trying to make sure we can see that this is where the wing is and this is where the background is. I'll flatten and then I'll go backward. Also, the way you've made it, it feels like that flat character design setup. So this kind of I feel like is more divine. It's speaking a more divine kind of anatomy for this guy. We've chosen a color for the light source, a color for the environment. It does feel like a deserted war scene that this guy is coming to either tell this guy, hey, take up arms and represent, or he's telling him, hey motherfucker, what are you doing killing my people? I'll fuck you up. Let me just get that detail back because we lost some detail there. But when you go in for this kind of environment setup and you're in the grayscale stage, the first color that you bring in over your grayscales is the color of the light environment. What's the color of the sky? What's the color of the atmosphere? Write that back to me. The first color that you choose after you've painted in grayscale, you're ready to move into color, is the color of the wash color, the light environment. If you don't choose that, you end up with these random colors coming from all kinds of places on the map. Just all kinds of areas. There's the sliders and too many places at once. But then take a look at what's happening to the slider. It stays either along this cool area where it belongs. The ground stays in this exact area. Of course, there are the random spikes, the saturation spikes over here. The flesh tones are completely different materials, so they need something else, but they're all pretty desaturated. They're sticking close to this. Right? You don't need, in order to make flesh look realistic, it doesn't have to be pink. You need the light environment first. What if it's overcast? Same thing. If you've ever seen what happens to trees, the color of trees in overcast, when it rains, what happens to the color of the ground? The fog is kind of like a blue color because there's all that light from the outside shining through. The clouds themselves have like a cool color to them. They're not warm. Our colors, unless it's sunset time, the colors of the sky are pretty cool. And this doesn't feel like sunset time. It feels like overcast. I mean, there's nothing indicating that there's one bright spot in the horizon. It's just him and then this really, really dark sky. Right, so this is what I recommend for these changes. Just unifying the color palette. The reds were just too red. And it kind of feels more unified, more... This blade is really bright, so it might cast another shadow behind him just this way with his legs. This way you can unify as an arrow this foreground with this background and maybe add in some more props here and there, maybe dead bodies, I don't know. Maybe I know it's a kind of cheesy, but maybe you can have like a spotlight, but very, very done very strategically, just coming from the top to show that he descended. So lighten. course. I have to make sure it kind of just tapers a little bit. Maybe I'll use it on color dodge. Just to, create a distinction between him and his surrounding. And then darken. So you can darken, remember you can darken the sky around the corners to encase the canvas in, but you can't do it in a way where, it becomes completely black. The sky has to be light. Okay. So before, after. Such coloring only for portraits, right? What do you mean, Calvin? Get environment light color. I mean the before one. For portraits, if there is a really warm candle nearby, or a warm fireplace, or a warm room lamp. But yeah. So any questions? Any questions? Sorry, I'm just reading comments. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Close this down, shut it down, and then, yes. Alright, so this is another example of pinks. I don't know if you intended this, but all I really have to do is just do that. Okay, so please just invest some time into studying some skin tones. I know it's like the most rehashed tutorial out there across YouTube, but there's a reason why people need this. People have trouble painting skin tones. I mean, it's a really needed tutorial out there, and I have a couple of my own. If you guys like my teaching style, but it was just too red, man. You didn't need that. And in places that you can have the red, so I'm going to erase away your previous colors. You can have lipstick. You can have blush. You can have the waterline here. If this waterline is too big, by the way, it makes her look old. You can have these areas red, but you just can't have her purple. You need to look up some good referencing. Good colors, good skin tones sit over right here. Let me find it for you. Best skin tone I can come up with, the best base tone, D9AF91. D9AF91. Alright, this is the best skin tone. It sits right in between, right on orange, really, really light pale orange. That's the best skin tone. And that's highlighter. Base tone would be just a little bit more towards the reds, just along here. C88E75. And the super highlight tones, often to no man's land, used only in the smallest areas of the face, right along here, F9, E2, C9. Alright? Where your colors were before, it was just pure, you were on the wrong side. You were on the opposite side. Alright? What would happen if the rest of the painting, if the sky was extremely dark, such as a Mordor sky, would that mean that the rest of the painting would be, in theory, darker? Yes, it would be Herodsworth. Because when the light environment is that dark, what's the primary light source? So in a Mordor scene, what's the primary light source in Mordor? In a midday, right? There's always overcast, there's always clouds. When it's daytime, you can tell because you can see each other. Nighttime is probably pitch black, and you can only see the glow of Caradhras in the distance. Not Caradhras, Mount Doom. In the distance, so that you wouldn't really see any major long shadows. I don't think everything would be very soft and very dispersed in midday Mordor. but the wash of it would definitely be a warmer, not a warmer, a cooler, like a gray. It would be completely desaturated. There's no warm unless it was nighttime or some light shone through. All of the major good sky colors, if there was pure overcast like that, would be gone, and we'd be left with a gray. And if you have to have a color and make it interesting, a blue-gray. If you look at all the Mordor concept art, that's exactly what they use. Either a pure gray or a blue-gray. If you see them using a warm color, it's like the stupidest thing. Where you use warm is Lothlorien. Alright, so that's where they had lots and lots of warms, and it was just all glowy and pretty. When they first see it, that's where you use the warm, and then you think Mordor, and it's death and destruction and images. Mordor, Lord of the Rings. So yeah, grayscale, pure grayscale, and just a light of the evil mountain of death and the Illuminati. Just grayscale everywhere. I think this is a little exaggerated, but yeah, this works just fine as if this was the sun shining through, making everything even more fiery. So it's gray and fire. Alright? Well, lightning was a real exaggeration. I don't know what they were thinking. Why the lightning? I mean, it's already so ominous. Just throwing the lightning in the air. It was an electrical storm. I'm sure these guys were advised not to go out. I'm sorry. The way they did Lord of the Rings just makes me laugh. So before, after. So, the reason why she looks old. So you might have had a younger... I'm not sure if this is supposed to be an older woman. But ways to make her look younger, completely just omit this inner shadow right here. You don't need this. This is making her eyes sag. You should also make the waterline, this waterline right here, much, much smaller. So get rid of that. That inner area that a good makeup artist, at least a good makeup artist knows if you want to enlarge an eye, and usually all of the Asian eyes that I worked on when I was working in makeup, I would never ever ever put shadow on the inside, ever. And that's because the eye gets smaller, so they want to enlarge the eye, so they put shadow on the outside to assume that it's getting bigger, to create the feeling that it's getting bigger. So this sag feeling, this feeling that it's sagging, I'm probably just going to use liquify, filter, liquify, cancel, liquify. Okay, so I'm just tucking that in. This no longer feels like it's a sagging eye, but she still has that cute kind of girly puff in her eyes, but it's no longer a sag. And I'm making the eyes symmetrical. So now the eyes look a lot younger compared to before, and this is just in the eyes. Alright, so you see how saggy they were? The purple is in the way, but I can always grayscale it so that the purple doesn't bother us so much. Do you see how saggy they were? They felt old. And then another reason why she feels old is, again, this could be the reference that you're working with. You could be drawing an older woman. But this right here, you just have to defuse it. Younger people have laugh lines. It's okay. It's possible. But we usually, when we're painting and we want to flatter a face, we take age away. And we kind of soften this laugh line to be less of a wrinkle and just a gentle bump. And it makes the face look all the more beautiful. Connect that here. This shadow right here is completely wrong. We don't need that shadow. You should replace it with a highlight instead for her nose. But let me see if I can get the old shadows of the nose back. Okay, so before, after, just a softer, even without the nose correction. Let's omit that. She looks much older with the heavier laugh line than with the softer laugh line. My eyes are here. My eyes are always here when I'm trying to see whether or not I have a a change that reads. And I think completely altogether I would just darken the entire image. No, just these shades here. Just for that contrast. And then that yellow color I showed you guys earlier, that yellow highlighter, this is just the warmth of the room. You've already gone so light, that's the thing, that it's hard not to choose a. These are the areas. Radially bringing in these highlights on the cheek, on the hood, on the nose, to make the face feel a little bit more alive and moist. Okay. What? So any questions? I dislike that I struggle with shading, but I still struggle with shading. When you're transitioning from grayscale to color, what's the next step after the wash? You get the color of the objects, but make sure that the color of the objects respects the wash. So when you have if the wash is blue and you have a purple coat, what happens to blue when you mix it with purple? If you have green grass and it's a blue wash, what happens to that green? It turns less yellow and has more of a blue green. It's still green, but has the film of the wash is what changes the colors of everything else. As like a toll booth, you have to walk through. All the colors have to go through the toll booth of the color wash. And that's it. You just start bringing everything out. You've already rendered enough at the grayscale stage. So before, after. Alright, all these were reasons why the face was looking old and just looking a little bit off. So I can push it a little bit towards the reds, just a touch, just to make her more flushed. But even then, it's such a massive jump from where it was before. Alright. Any questions regarding this? How do you avoid repetition when drawing, like lines and such? What do you mean repetition? How do you figure out a composition for a portrait? These are all really, really big questions. But I guess I can just try talking about them topically. A composition for a portrait, my best suggestion, Mr. Dragon, is zoom out and test out large shapes and see if you can balance negative and positive space. That's the first most important thing to do when you're trying to figure out a composition. Zoom the fuck out. How do you avoid repetition when drawing? I'm not sure what you mean by repetition. Repetition is good with line weight and brush type. So if your brush is the same throughout the whole painting process, awesome. Good for you. Stick to that. It's really good to do that. Just don't let that brush cancel out your edges. You can use a soft brush from start to finish, but I don't recommend it for early students because they don't have a good hold over their edge work yet. So, it'll just do a really bad job. How to draw dimpled cheeks. I've shown that before, but it's just about, let me show you that real quick, I guess. It's about choosing, yeah, that's right here, it's perfect. It's about choosing the shade that is the lightest beside the shade that's the darkest. That's all you have to do when you get a dimple. Just right beside each other on top of everything around them. Just light beside dark. Don't try to draw the dimple. Sculpt the dimple. Okay, so here's an example of a sky that could be darker, because look at this bioluminescence. So you have to make a choice now, Is it dark? Is it nighttime? Or is it... I think I already critiqued one of your work today, but it's good. It's good that you're trying all of these. But I think what needs to happen is I can do this in a much better technique. Let me choose this shade. Voila. And I can use a layer mode. So look what happens when we darken that. The glow of the plant life actually makes sense. Just need a darkening. And I'm probably going to change the value to be more cool. This is like a really intense darkening. Color burn. Now that's burning. That's like actually on fire. color dodge. This one might be a little nicer. This is why I'm saying there's no one set formula for using layer modes, is because there's just so many different combinations, different degrees of color, different color types, and different values. And I guess this one's fine. Where's color burn? This is the best one. When we do this, when we have this kind of effect, what we're doing is we're preserving the color. We're preserving the color of the atmosphere, but the color of the atmosphere can't be too saturated in a certain area. So what I have to do is desaturate it just a little bit, because the color of the atmosphere in darkness, there's no color in darkness. This is a really, really intense sun. There's lens flare and everything. So this bioluminescence this effect is terrible, but it's all I can do in a short time. And then this bioluminescence can work as a way to lead the eyes towards a direction, towards a point in the distance. And as we saw earlier, the point in the distance is what keeps the viewer looking. And this whole thing here can have some more bioluminescence or some sort of purple glow. And then the background, the base of the background could just be lighter near the base, going into purple at the tops. This is red. It turned into red, which is completely wrong. Let me see if I can find a different combination of values. This is what I wanted. Maybe just darken. Darken is too dark. But yeah, this is typically what the sky should be. You should not be doing yellow in the sky and then down here everything is so dark. Even the plant life that glows so minimally is so visible. It means the light environment is dark enough to allow the secondary minor light to become the primary. And so back here, this whole system back here, this whole like little doohickey you've got back here should actually be much darker in the distance, and it's got those minor little glows, those random sparkles. And alright, so in a landscape, the object that is furthest away is the darkest object, no longer the lightest, because there's no light in the atmosphere to illuminate it. But those are my suggestions for this piece. You had two completely different times of day and two halves of the landscape, two halves of the canvas. For this, you're not ready to transfer into color just yet. What you have to start doing is decide where is the light source coming from. If the light source is coming from the top down, then a lot of these areas here need to be blocked in, as if you're doing a form study. So this arm here is going to cast a shadow. The side of her shirt here, and this arm is going to cast another shadow. And then the side of her thigh over here. Maybe a secondary light source, the side of this. And that's how we block in. We think of the original geometry, the ancient geometry, the ancestral geometry. I don't know which word to use to represent, but that's what we do here. We're blocking in. So even the muscles get their own little dedicated top of the cube. Of course, we don't use it in this intensity. We have to make it blend with the area around it. So I'm just going to use a layer mode. That might help with that. It's just that the space you have under there is already so patchy. It'll make it hard to choose a value for all this. Let me choose the background color, see if I can make it lighter. The background color, when you do your initial wash to choose the light source environment, the background has to be bright enough. So we covered that a lot today, but I really want to stress that fact. Oh, see, shush. So if you want a lot of light to be visible, if they're outside, if they're outdoors. Oh, see. Shut up. Sorry, guys. If the light is supposed to be outdoors, if they're outdoors talking to each other, then this is typically how much contrast we're supposed to have at these degrees. So this is the light coming from the top right or something. What? Shush! He's having a conversation with me, this one. What? Sorry guys, she's so annoying. And then we've got the side of her face, the cheek, the side of her nose, the side of her forehead, a little bit over here. It's summertime, so she's in heat, like perpetually in heat. It's so annoying. When the winter comes, she's completely chill. She no longer thinks about sex. she's no longer a crazed lunatic. Actually, we should keep most of the contrast near the top. Okay. So this is exactly what I meant when I commented on your image. We need more contrast. We need to decide on the time of day. You need to make sure you block in before you blend. Some of these areas I'm not going to blend because this is the side of the cube, but the cheek I'll definitely blend that. And that's typically what you're supposed to be doing. And if you're not doing this, you're really just dancing around, beating around the bush. You're not really going to the, where the form is happening, and the form happens here. Make sure you get rid of your lines when you get into all of this. Anywhere where there's flesh, just blend it out. But remember, all of these points of blending started from something. They started from the geometry. But yeah, get rid of your lines. You will not get realism if you keep your lines. So I'm just going to get rid of them real quick. Select inverse. Whoops. Shush. So you see what happens when we get rid of the line? We have this like realism pop out of nowhere. It just pops out of the ground. And that combined with some really good geometry over the muscles, understanding the specular potential of every material that you draw, so the cheeks get a little bit highlighted, the sides of the mouth. So when the background is bright enough, you can pull off this kind of contrast. All right. Contact social services. So where you were before, you weren't really going anywhere, is what I'm trying to say. You weren't going anywhere with your contrast. Nothing was happening. You know, it was just, you were just rendering just for that. It was just a rendering that was happening, and you were blending around, you know, kind of just, I'm so sorry for this term, but I call it dicking around because this is what I used to do. You were dicking around, man. Where's the light source? How bright is the light source? Would it change the brightness of the room? What are the three components of a light environment? I'll close off the class with this final little lecture. What is the component? Yes, my child is obsessed with sex. What are the three components of a light environment? Yeah, it's my cat. Ossie. She's quiet now. I'll shut her up with some snacks later. She'll turn into an overweight sex addict. So yeah, I'm just waiting for the answers. Let me go up and see if I'm missing anything. Yes, form studies fix everything. I'd love to see someone here who's rendered something in Greyscale to see how they transfer it over. You know, and try to get something out of it. Try to figure out everything that I did today. Try to experiment it yourself. Try to experiment with it yourself. It's the skin tone tutorials are the reason why I subscribed. Thank you, Sayamini. I'm happy they helped you. It means a lot. There's a lot of glowing lava in Mordor. Yeah. Get environment light color wash, and first when you start going into painting, switching from grayscale to color are perfect. Alright, so how do you select something so easily? I just slow down with my lasso. Just hope to God I don't lose the lasso edge. The nature of the light, material of the object, and I forgot. Light source, object, and room. Light source, environment, and then the material of the object. I took notes last week. Where are the notes? Oh, okay, that was you, Stephen. Okay. Light source, object, room. So Stephen answered the question, yes. Color of the object, light source, I forgot the other. You shouldn't forget the other. Forgetting the other fucks you up for life. The other is the color of the object, light source. The other is the room. So that's why this is why my change reads, because I've considered the other, which was the room. Once the room is bright enough, I know I can reach and maximize towards a certain high point, and then I can just start rendering. So the light source is coming from here, but she's in the shadow. The light source is around her. There's probably some secondary light source on her thigh. I can throw this half of her body in a bit more shadow. Some light is coming through the cast shadow of her head on the arm, and then the breasts are casting their own shadow. So there's more of that over here. And then there's some more secondary light source. So you can't find the secondary light source until you found the primary. The secondary light source opposes the primary. So over here, right along this strip, we need a secondary light source, but only because I know that this is the core shadow section. So that arm is really starting to read. At this point, you get rid of your, once you start rendering on Greyscale, all of these lines should just be gone. They should just say goodbye. I'm out. I'm outie. I'm leaving home. I'm out of here. So these values here are a little bit high, but you can get away with this no man's sparkle right here, this shimmer in her cheek, just as long as you're not using it anywhere else on the face. But this high point, that's just the sunlight coming in. But this is what I meant with my critique. This is what I want to see. Get rid of those lines, man. Ossie! You know you have to be quiet during class. Are you gonna be quiet? No? Alright. Just wait till I'm done class. Watch what's gonna happen. Okay, just a little bit of light over here. Maybe the material is dark, so it's not gonna get that much. I don't know, it really depends on the kind of material she's wearing. What kind of reference you use for it. I feel like it should be this bright as well. If it's shiny, if this area brightened up, then yeah, this area would obviously. Cast shadows should be blurred, but that's it. When I use the lasso tool, it ends up making the thing really jagged. I think I will use stronger light source from now on for illustrations like that. Yeah. Light source, object, room. I'm sure you guys hear her. Meow. So flatten this. Get rid of that.